They didn't just kill her, they made it a spectacle. In the year 613 AD, one of the most powerful women in all of European history was dragged before an army, not to be judged, not to be imprisoned, but to be destroyed in a way so savage, so deliberately humiliating, that even seasoned historians struggle to describe it without pause. She had ruled kingdoms. She had outlived enemies, conspiracies, and wars that would have broken any man. She was in her 70s, and they tied her to a horse. What happened next wasn't just an execution, it was a message, written in bone and blood, about what happens when power is taken too personally. The question is, who were the real monsters in this story? To understand what happened on that cold autumn morning in 613 AD, you first need to understand who Brunhilda really was. Because history has not been kind to her memory, and that injustice is part of the story itself. She was born a Visigoth princess in Spain around 543 AD, a world of Roman ruins, tribal warfare, and kingdoms held together by marriage and fear. She was educated, multilingual, and politically sharp in ways that made men uncomfortable. When she was sent north to marry Sigebert I, King of Austrasia, she didn't arrive as a passive bride, she arrived as a partner, an operator, someone who understood that power wasn't given. It was constructed carefully, brick by brick. For decades, she built it. She survived the assassination of her husband. She survived the abduction and forced remarriage of her daughter. She survived coup attempts, betrayals, and the slow erosion of allies who died or defected around her. While other royal women of her era faded into chapels and convent walls, Brunhilda governed. She managed diplomacy with the Byzantine Empire. She corresponded personally with Pope Gregory the Great, who praised her intelligence in letters that still exist today. She was, by any honest measure, one of the most capable rulers of the early medieval world, male or female. But capability, in a world ruled by Frankish warlords and tribal loyalty, was not always protection. Sometimes it was a threat. By the early 600s, she had accumulated decades of enemies, men who resented being outmaneuvered by a woman, nobles whose land and power she had challenged. And at the center of it all, a rival queen named Fredegund, whose hatred for Brunhilda ran so deep it outlived Fredegund herself. A passed-down-like inheritance to her son, King Clotaire II. It was Clotaire who would finally catch her. And what he chose to do with her would reveal something deeply disturbing, not just about one king, not just about one execution, but about the psychology of humiliation and the lengths men will go to erase a woman who refused to be small. By 613 AD, Brunhilda's world was collapsing, and she knew it. The alliances she had spent 50 years building were fracturing one by one. The Frankish nobles, long resentful of her grip on power, had made their choice. They chose Clotaire. Here's what most history books skip over. Brunhilda wasn't captured in battle. She was betrayed. Her own grandsons handed her over. The same boys she had raised, protected, and politically positioned, surrendered her to her greatest enemy without a fight. Not for ideology, not for justice, for land grants and titles. Let that sit for a moment. She was delivered to Clotaire's camp, bound and humiliated. A woman who had corresponded with emperors, now dragged through mud like a common criminal. But Clotaire didn't move immediately. He waited. He put her on public display for 3 days. Why 3 days? That question has quietly haunted historians for centuries. Some believe it was theater, deliberately calculated to strip away her dignity before witnesses, to make her small in the eyes of people who had once feared her. Others suggest something darker, that Clotaire was building a public case, forcing soldiers and nobles to see her as a monster deserving of what was coming. It was psychological destruction before the physical kind. And then, on the 3rd day, the charges were announced. Clotaire accused her of causing the deaths of 10 Frankish kings. 10. Whether that number was true, an exaggeration, or pure propaganda, it didn't matter anymore. The sentence had already been decided. What happened in that open field was not an execution. It was a ritual of annihilation. First, they tortured her. The sources, Frank chronicles, written by men who witnessed or recorded the aftermath, describe it with uncomfortable casualness. She was subjected to 3 days of physical torment before the final sentence was carried out. Every deliberate, every public, every act designed not to kill her quickly, but to unmake her slowly. Then came the moment that has disturbed historians for 14 centuries. They tied her to a single wild horse, not a trained war horse. A wild, unbroken animal, chosen specifically because it could not be controlled, could not be directed, would not stop. She was bound to it by her hair, one arm, and one leg, and they drove it forward. A woman in her 70s, a woman who had ruled kingdoms, raised kings, and shaped the political architecture of an entire continent, reduced to this. The crowd of soldiers watched. Some accounts suggest they cheered. Others imply a strange, heavy silence fell over the field as it happened, as if even men hardened by medieval warfare understood they were witnessing something that crossed a line no one had officially drawn. She did not survive it. No one could. But here is the detail that never makes the textbooks. Clotaire didn't leave afterward. He stayed. He watched until it was completely over. That single fact tells you everything about what this really was. This was never about justice. It was about erasure.